Hey, CT leaders, this is kind of part two to the last video I sent you, where I talked about the greater footprint in the city of Chillicothe. And I want to reiterate a passage that I read the last time. It is Jeremiah 29, and I believe this is verse 5. Build homes and plan to stay. Plant gardens and eat the food they produce. Marry and have children. Then find spouses for them so you may have many grandchildren. Multiply, do not dwindle away, and work for the peace and the prosperity of the city where I sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. God is placing a heart and a vision of ministry in the leaders of our church, and we're asking for a footprint in the city. We've got to think about what we do about the culture of this city. And I read an article recently I want to share with you. Kerry Newhoff's a pastor I read a lot of. A lot of his writings helped me walk through the burnout a couple of years ago. He just has a lot of good things to say. And the title of this blog he wrote is this: 5 Ways Christians Can Approach the Rapidly Changing Moral Culture. Some of you are probably freaking out, thinking maybe we're going to infiltrate the city and what we're going to do about that, and all the craziness that goes in. And some of you better live clear out in the middle of the boonies, which I don't exactly get. Every time Jesus sent people out, he sent them to a city, every place, and to a population of people. And Kerry Newhoff says here that sometimes we feel like we've stepped in the world we stepped into when we became a Christian or got into ministry doesn't exist any longer. Like, it's changed so fast we can't do anything with it. He said the culture around us is changing, and he says he sees at least 5 approaches emerging that with the church and its engagement in the culture, and I think he's right on all of these. Some are helpful and some aren't, he says. So number 1, he says this: we can be oblivious to the culture. And he says some churches are oblivious to what's going on. You can walk into a church and it looks like, he says, you can't tell whether it's 1996, 2016, or 1966. In a lot of ways, he's right. He said about the sermons being theoretical and not practical. They don't engage the realities of the world people inevitably have to walk back into on the Monday mornings. And so I don't know that we're that church. I don't want to be that church, the one that's oblivious to the culture. He talks about, he said the being oblivious to the culture produces an idea of irrelevance, like we don't matter. We can hide from the culture, and some of us lean into that. Churches that are into culture are different from those that hide from the culture. He says they're scared. They're scared what the culture is going to do. They're scared about the power of the culture to influence the kids and things like that. And so they create their own little Christian subcultures. So everything, they have to have an alternative to everything. They don't really engage the culture. They just stay away from it, right? So effectively, it's retreat and runs counter from the church's mission to advance. As a result, many in this camp don't actually know any non-Christians. And I know people in our church who've said that before. And we as leaders have to make sure that's not the case. We have to engage people for people to know Christ. You can't reach the world you don't know or understand or love, he says. Number 3, he says, we can slam the culture. And this seems to be, I've even felt this among different people who are part of our church. This has become a very popular approach over the last few decades. He says, picking when the United States Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage in the U.S. last year. And I agree with him on the next part. So a lot of times us as Christians expect non-Christians to act like Christians or have the same moral values as Christians. And when the whole culture, when I read for you that 58,000 to 76,000-ish people in Ross County claim no religious affiliation whatsoever, we can't expect them to have the same moral code as we as Christians do. And we are definitely in the minority at that point. And the issue is not what laws we have or what laws we don't have. It's an issue of us being on mission to alter the hearts of people for the cause of Christ. And so what are we going to do about that? If you want to keep being an effective reaching country people, keep judging them and not engaging them. The Bible says that the law came through Moses, but, there's a big word there, but, this is in John 1, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And so we have to engage the culture with grace and truth. We hit with grace first. We accept people as they are. We don't expect them to have a moral code they can't have. And we embrace them, we love them, we forgive them, and then we say, like Jesus said, there's a better way. Go and sin no more. Look what God's plans are. And we help them walk that out. So number 4 would be the other way to engage the culture is embrace people and offer an alternative. For all the approaches I've noticed, he says, this is the most encouraging in my view, and it's the one I also try to embrace. There's much about today's culture we may not like, but that's no excuse to stop loving people within the culture. In an age when many churches push away people they don't agree with, the field is right for Christians willing to embrace their neighbors, to actually love them, the kind of love Jesus told us to do. Does that mean we have to agree with everything they do? Of course not. But he said, think about this. The church is uniquely positioned to offer a radically beautiful alternative to the culture in so many key issues, like our sexuality, how we handle our money, what we do with our bodies, and in basic disciplines like confession and self-control. When culture truly becomes post-Christian, as it is, it's often not that people are rejecting Christian teachings, it's that they don't even know what those teachings are, and they are surprisingly open to Christianity if the Christians they meet are loving, generous people. So we got to embrace people. And he goes on to say a few other things about that. Then he says the fifth approach would be this: to use the culture to reach the culture. The culture around us isn't the only culture around. Your church has a culture too. And it can be a bridge for barrier to reaching people. I've been preaching out of Acts 17 lately. Paul's trying to use the culture of the Greeks at Mars Hill to get the gospel across to them, telling them that God beforehand determined boundaries. He wanted the nations of peoples to seek him and find him, even if they're falling their way in the dark, because it's in him we live and move and have our being. He's trying to use cultural paradigms to preach the gospel to people. That was called, Paul said, I became all things to all men that I might win some. That's how he did it. He said, it's time for churches to cut the weird and irrelevant and effective. Our mission's too important. When you adapt your music communication and make your church accessible to the unchurched, you don't necessarily water down a thing. At least you don't have to. He says he don't do that at their church. You just really make what you're sharing accessible and understandable. If you want to make your church more effective, use the culture to reach the culture. So here's what I'm saying. When we reach Flow Coffee, we got to do things differently. We may have to think about what locations we're meeting in. We got to think about the tactics we're using. We got to think about the mission we're on, and really get in a place where we can embrace people. We're not talking about issues. We're talking about people who have issues. We can't help people by just tackling issues. We have to embrace people, engage people, and overcome them. So we need to be on the forefront, the spear end of figuring out how to get people to think about the truth of God by engaging them and being inside the city of Chillicothe and strategically making plans to be a part of what God's doing in the county seat of our county can make a huge difference in how we can affect and help people. And so we need to be praying about that. I love you guys. Thank you for being a part of what God's doing at Church But I hope you hear my heart. Let's figure out a way to not shy away from the culture, but to engage it. To not hide from it, but engage it. To not be oblivious to it, but engage it. To not slam it or judge it, but to engage it. Embrace people and use even things around us every day to affect people around us. So I hope you listen to our heart. I hope you understand what I think God's doing. I love you guys. Thanks for leading with me.